Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing story coming to us from the US. We have Dawn Anderson on board today. Dawn was born in Glendale, California in 1959, but very early in life moved to a rural farming community in Utah, where his mother and younger brother lived for a good part of his life after his father passed away. He always believed the homes they lived in were haunted, only to discover they were not, a result of spirit hauntings, but numerous abduction and contact experiences, which only increased in frequency and intensity as he grew older. Then one night in the summer of 1984, as a single parent himself to a young boy, they both were taken from their room and carried through a beam onto a craft, which was floating in the air across the street from their home. When he was placed back in his bed after the event, he immediately had an instant recall of a lifetime of past contact experiences, which included watching himself being escorted into the delivery room where he was being born, with the gray being who was reminding him to not forget who he was. The experiences continued throughout his life on a shamanic level, as well as being a contactee with remembered experiences. These experiences include times where he was told not to talk about the subject of alien contact, followed up by a military abduction experience and a real-time contact experience involving a race of beings referred to as the praying mantis, with 3 others in the high country of Utah, not too far from the Skinwalker Ranch. As a public speaker, he has spoken to audiences throughout the western states of Idaho, Utah, Oregon, and Washington about his experiences and the impact they have had on his life, as well as the Area 51 conference, which was held in Rachel, Nevada at the time. Also, recent interviews with the authors and researchers Grant Cameron and Preston Dennett, as well as recent shoots with the Discovery Channel. He initially formed the Oregon UFO Encounters Group to help contactees and abductees with a platform to speak from. The author of The Wanderers, A Soul's Journey, and Path of the Shambhala blog site, he currently resides in the Portland, Oregon area and works in the public sector, as well as performing energetic removals and curse work influence. So Dawn, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. So growing up in the late 50s, early 60s, having these paranormal stuff happen to you, how did you cope with it? How did your family cope with it? Because people didn't talk about this type of stuff, and especially aliens wasn't really like a hot subject at the time. So what happened really?
Oh, I didn't really talk about it for a really, really long time when I first had one. Okay, when I was a kid, a child, I was like 4 years old, and this was living in a small rural town in Utah. It's just my mom and me and my little brother, who's a couple years younger than me. We were living in this little rural town, so it was like haunted. Excuse me, I got something in my eye. So I thought it was haunted for 20 years.
Wow.
And we would have these weird experiences with what I thought were ghosts, and they were the grays coming in to get me at night. And then the little gorilla people, I call it gorilla people. And these gorilla people were very, very similar to Whitley Strieber's, if you've watched the movie Communion. They were like those little gray guys when Christopher Walken is dancing with the little gray guy. I'm not a little gray guy, but a little gorilla guy. It's kind of a troll-looking guy, really.
Yeah.
And they would come and get me. I'd huddle up in the corner at night, and I'd just be like, freaked out, pulling the sheets really, really tight across my neck and my body, because I was scared to death that they were coming. I knew they were coming, but I thought they were ghosts, and this little guy would come in and he would tickle me. I guess he's trying to make me feel better. And it would just freak me out, and they'd pick me up and he'd walk me through the walls. And so my recollection of it at the time was there were ghosts in the basement. There was a gorilla ghost that would come into my room all night. It was this went on all summer long. But it was a year before I was going to start school. And there was a man shining a light through the bedroom window. And so I went for years thinking that place was haunted, up until I was 24. For 20 years, it was like, this place is haunted. And then we moved from that place. We moved from that place to another smaller town in southern Utah. And it was mostly an old Indian reservation. And there was some stuff there that just went on. It's like, we would say, for instance, this is one thing that happened. It's like my brother and I would go for a ride with our stepdad, who she had met when we were living in this other town. So she got married. We moved to this little tiny town in southern Utah. It was even smaller. It was maybe 300 people lived there, right? Because he was working construction down the area. So you had probably 300 people living in that little town. And we went for a ride with him one night and left my mom sitting in the, I'll call her Judy. My mom is Judy because there's a story behind all that. So we left Judy sitting in the kitchen washing dishes. We come back and she is locked up in the car. She says, I'm not going back in the house. There's something in there. I don't know what it is, but there's something in there, right? And so there's one day, we all get in the car, we go for a ride at night, we come back, all the lights are turned on, the radio's up full blast. It's just like, kind of like a close encounters thing where you have everything just blasting away, all the electrical things are just blasting away. And there's nobody in the house. The lights were turned off when we left, the radio was turned off, it was dark. We come back, everything's all lit up and nobody's there. The doors are still locked, the windows are locked. There's just no explanation for it. So we always thought the place was haunted, and it may have been. I don't know, but for those two houses to be haunted like that was kind of strange. And we actually moved out of that. We just stayed there for the summer. We moved, and it wasn't until 2024 where I actually had what they call my awakening experience. That's when my son and I were both taken. And I was in another little small town further up northern Utah. And we were taken, and when I sat back in bed, it's just like I had this instant recall. How you have a near-death experience? Some people talk about seeing their life flash in front of their eyes. I had the same thing, but it wasn't the live flashing in front of my eyes. It was a UFO experience thing flash in front of my eyes, and I had instant memory and recall of everything all the way back to before I was born. And I was sitting up in the corner with a gray watching Judy as she's in the maternity room ready to give birth to me. Okay, and the gray was going over some like last minute instructions or something. Says, hey, don't forget, this is who you are. This is what you are.
Now, Judy was about to give birth to you, so I imagine like you were like she was 9 months pregnant before you coming in.
That's interesting. Yeah, that was like September of '59. That's when I was born. So she was giving birth to me. Yes.
Okay. Just coming back to when you were a kid, were you afraid of the dark? Did you ever sleep against the wall? Were you traumatized by the fact that they were coming for you?
No, but there was one experience that happened there that is kind of freaked everybody out. Is like, I would get these sinus infections quite a bit at the start of the summer, and so I would go into the doctor would set me down. So yeah, you got a sinus infection. And back then the thing was, we give you a shot. So he would give me a shot, let me go over to, they had a little drawer there that was for, had full of little toys and stuff. He says, go pick a toy out. So I'd go out and pick out usually it was a little plastic army guy. I'd go pick out a little plastic army guy, and I had starting to get a collection of those. There was one time where that all switched, and I get the sinus infection really bad because they pop up like every 2 weeks for whatever reason, right? And so this was like my third time going in there. So I go in there, I'm sitting down, and he said, oh, hold on, the nurse is going to come in and they'll give you a shot, and then you go get your little toy, And I'm excited, little kid. And I see her walking in, and this is so vivid to this day. I see her walking in. She's holding a little pan with a vial on it. You see the needle right there. She says, "Hi, Don." And then I just like, boom, I busted out the door. I busted right past her. I ran down the hallway, jumped in the car, and I locked the doors in the car. And they couldn't get me out of the car. They had to have somebody come over, pick the lock on it because the keys were hanging in it. Back in that day, you didn't really need your key, but you need the key to unlock the door, and so it was common for people just to leave their keys in their car and just walk into wherever they're going. They couldn't get me out. I just huddled up in the back seat, and I'd like in the corner there at our station wagon. I would not open the door. So that's about the same time all this stuff was going on. So, but I was never really afraid of the dark. My little brother was, he's scared to death. I used to freak him out all the time by hiding under the bed, and he'd come into the room, and because we shared the room, and I'd reach out and grab his leg or something. He'd just like freaked out when the light was turned off. So I thought that was funny, but he would wake up screaming, and I'd wake up screaming. And it was what happened when I had this experience at the age of 24, and I had these instant memories. Then I instantly knew what had happened in that house in Spanish Fork. That's the town we were looking at. It's a little town in Spanish Fork. And I had instant recall, and I knew what was happening. I knew what was going on. There wasn't a man outside the window shining a flashlight in. It was actually the ray of the ship coming in the house. Okay, and I could see it from my bedroom. There's a big window right there across the bed from us, so I could see outside, and I could see that ray coming through. Okay, and then as soon as that would happen, I would see the little troll guy walking through the wall, and he would come in and get me. Okay, he would come in and tickle into my arms, and just like I'd like crunched up like this, say no, 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 and he would tickle me, and then he would pick me up and carry me through the wall, and we'd carry in the beam, and we'd go onto the ship.
Now, on what level was the bedroom? Like on the first floor, second floor?
It was the first floor. It was just a house. It was a small house.
Okay.
So it was. We had the one floor, and there's a little bit of a basement, and in the basement there was a washing machine, and she would take the clothes out at night, and she would just throw them over the line, because that's kind of the way they did it back then. She didn't want to buy. I don't know if she didn't have the money to buy a dryer, or she just didn't want to do that. Mm-hmm. She was kind of old-fashioned that way. She'd grown up in World War II. It was like, okay, let's just take them outside because it's cheaper.
Yeah. Wow.
Well,
okay.
So they'd come in and get me. Then when they would come in and get me, they would introduce me to this little gray character, who it seems to be the same guy. He's followed me down through my life, and he's always been there. So even before I was born, he was there. He was the guy that was introducing me in the room. And then we would do these little, what I would call exercises. And he would take me on the ship, and it had this little plasma ball. And he would hold this plasma ball in his hands, and he would thought project it over to me, and it would float through the air, and it would land in my hands, and then he'd want me to do the same thing. And then I would think project it back to him, and it would float through the air back to him. And we had these little exercises that we would do like that. So it seemed like the whole thing was, and that kind of a theme continued on throughout my life. It was just kind of, we're taking you, we're going to do this energy thing and teach you how to do this projection stuff,
Did you ever like drive crafts or like learn, were you ever shown symbols? Yeah,
there was, I was talking to Greg Cameron about this one, where what actually happened was I was actually abducted up in the canyons, and that was back in, what was it, 84? No, it was 84. It was like about 74. I was 14 years old, okay? And I was stuck 15 miles up the canyon all by myself at 14 years old. It was, kind of cold, and I was being chased. And so I got locked into, this is going to sound weird, but I locked myself into the outhouse because I was 14 and there was nothing else out there. There's nowhere to go. And I could hear something chasing me. And so I locked myself in the outhouse to protect myself, because that was the only shelter I could find. And their outhouses are sturdy. They're like prepared to, you can hold off a bear in those outhouses, so I knew I was going to be safe because it was like 9 o'clock at night. It was dark. It was cold. There was no place to go. And I'm just kind of freaking out. And I'm thinking, I got to go. I got to find some place to hide. So that was there. I ran over, I locked myself in, and I could hear everything crawling around outside. It was actually grays. I thought it was skunks at the time, but it was grays. Yeah. And when they came and got me there, they put me on a craft, and I was actually sitting in the driver's seat. Okay. And so it was, now I'm getting some flack on this because the seats weren't exactly like they should have been or something like that from people say, oh, no, that wasn't it because the seats are different. You know, I was like, no, you're missing the whole point of it is who's that guy from Area 51 who, God, his name escapes me, who described how he had seen the inside of a craft at Area 51, and the craft that he described was exactly like the same one that I was on, with the exception there was one seat in the center instead of three. So that they have a way to be able to, you know, it's like, well, everything else is exactly the same when you're complaining about the seating, right? It's like, it was the exact same seat, the exact same craft that was at Area 51, it's just the seats were different, okay? And so it was really amazing because you had in front of you, I was sitting down in the seat in front of me, there's a control panel that had lights on it. It didn't have any buttons or anything like that. It just had like lights, touch lights or something.
Okay.
And you had two grays that were kind of manning that. And I was sitting in the seat that was kind of like a bucket seat. You know how you get those kind of, back in the 60s, they had those seats that had the headphones in it, looked like an egg. Yeah, it was something similar to that, you know, but it had this foam that kind of wrapped in around you to hold you in place. And it was suspended in midair, right in the center of the ship. And it had these arm rests that you would sit your arms in, and your fingers and your hands would slide into these rests, and it kind of locked in place. And then you could just maneuver it like this, however you wanted the ship to turn. You go this way, it goes one way, you go this way, that way. And you're using your arm rest to kind of control the ship, but it is also connected to your head and your brain so that it could actually tell what you wanted to do. So you really didn't need the arm rest, but it was kind of built for a human, so to speak, to learn how to operate the thing, I guess is the best thing. And we took off. And before we left, the screen on the ship just totally gave, I mean, there's a big screen on the ship that was above the console, but the grays were at. And at first it was just like part of the ship. It was silver, it was the gray, it was a silver type of material, metal of some sort, and it gave way. It just kind of melted away and it gave way. And you could look outside the ship, and it was like having at first I thought it was like a HD. We didn't have HD back in the day. There's no HD available. We didn't even know what it was. But it was more like OLED quality. Okay, a step above HD. It was so crystal clear that you could see the leaves on the trees. You could see everything that was on the ground walking around. And there's a bunch of grays out there walking around. And something happened and we took off, and you could see everything just kind of disappear behind us, and we were out there flying someplace. So I was actually sitting in the seat, whether I was the one behind the controls or just because I had no idea where we were going. I didn't know, you know, but they were probably operating something on the control panel to get us where we need to go from point A to point B. And we ended up in the middle of the universe out there someplace. I don't know, you have no idea where it's at because there's no correlation for an individual, even with the astronauts that we have and the astronomers and all that. You can't pinpoint where these places are because you need a 3D representation up in space, and you need to know the area to be able to say, okay, this is where you're at. We didn't have that. Okay, it's not like going from here to New York. You have a longitude and latitude coordinates that you get to. You have to have a longitude, latitude, and then another source available because it's 3D and you're in space. You know, so. Okay. And the praying mantis did this too. When we had the praying mantis experience, what happened with them is I did ask them. I said, "Well, where are we at?" Because we're clear out there in space someplace. And he kind of just looked at me. He says, I can't tell you, you wouldn't understand, basically, is what he was saying. He says, you wouldn't understand because there's no point that you can relate to out in space where you can map it to Earth.
Yeah.
It's not like Betty and Barney Hill. Betty Hill had a kind of constellation that she was giving. It says, okay, this is where you're at. You know, she was able to draw it down and write it down on a map, and it correlated directly with something that we know is out there. There's no reference to it. I mean, we have no idea to be able to understand where this place is at in space because it's just too big. Or it could have been interdimensional too. I don't know.
Now, regarding that ship of yours, did you actually see the outside of it?
The outside of it was not very big. I mean, it looked kind of small, but once you get inside these ships, they're actually, I don't know how they do it. It's much bigger than what it looks like on the outside. And it was a saucer-shaped ship, you know, kind of, I guess they would call them a scout ship. I don't know if that's what they actually are or not. You know, I mean, it's hard to say what their use is for them, but it was a small saucer-shaped ship on this particular one. Yeah, so, yep. That's the one experience. People have said they've seen me on ships before, and I'm like, that's kind of, I don't know if it's me or maybe it's a clone, so to speak, because they probably have clones.
Getting back to when you were a kid and you were going through the wall, do you actually remember the how it felt going through it? Because I've never been taken through a wall, so I find that fascinating.
There really wasn't any feeling, so to speak, on that, at least as far as I remember as a kid. I know as an adult, when I had my experience when me and my son we were taken through the wall. I didn't feel the wall so much when we were going through it. I mean, we were actually going through a cement wall because we're in the basement. We were going through the cement wall. We're actually going through the ground, and probably a set of stairs that was on the outside of the house as well, which is a big old heavy block of cement, right? And I didn't really feel that so much, but as we were going up into the ray, or the beam, and going into the ship, there are some telephone lines that were between us and the ship. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, God, we're gonna get fried. We're going through these lines, man. You know, I'm kind of freaking out over it because I got my son with me. He's right with me as well. I'm holding his hand and we're going through the ship, into the ship. I think, man, we're gonna get fried. But I did feel a little tingle. Okay, so it wasn't like going through the wall. I mean, there was just really no feeling about that at all. But when I'm going through the telephone lines, my body did tingle because of electricity. So there was a little bit of a, you know. And the thing that was really weird about that is there was absolutely zero sound. There was nothing. It was quiet. Everything was really still when we were doing that. So it's kind of alarming because there's no dogs barking, no crickets, no wind, nothing. So wow. It's like, yeah.
Now, were you shown when you're on, like, being trained? A lot of people, you know, contactees tend to be shown like different apocalypse type scenarios. Were you shown that type of stuff just to get a feeling from you?
I had something like that briefly, and it was more along a kind of a religious tone. And I don't know if it was just my background because I came from a religious, I was kind of born again at the time, you know, and the feeling that came over to me was wormwood, and there were people they were great showing me dead fish and all this kind of stuff. And I kind of think that's a phase you go through, to be honest with you. I mean, there is definitely a message that they want to get to you. It's like, okay, this is your planet. You need to take care of it because it's a living being and you are associated with a living being. So you need to care for that living being like you would your kids. All right. It's not something you can just ignore and reject because it's responsible for a lot of life. And so you should take care of it, which brings to me. And the other thing that really they kept, for whatever reason, this Gray kept stressing this as I was growing up. He says, you're so important, you're so important, you're so important. Yeah, you're very important. And he would just, every time I'd meet with him, he would say that. He'd just say, you're very important. And I think it kind of bled through because my ego got the best of me there for a while. You know, I was like, yeah, look at, you know, it wasn't really that, you know, even today, I have people say, you know, there's been attempts against me and, you know, for speaking out on the subject, so to speak, and men in blackish type of thing from time to time. And the people look at me and they'll say, oh, you're not that important. I say, I agree. I'm not. I'm just this guy who's trying to make a living, you know, living on planet Earth. And these guys have a tendency, for whatever reason, to come after just ordinary people. You know, I mean, there are farmers out there who see something, they'll have an experience, and people show up and say, don't talk about this, you know. And it's like, they're a farmer. Why are you bothering a farmer out in the field? Maybe because he doesn't have, and it has a really big effect of saying, ooh, I gotta back off this, you know, I don't want to talk about it. Yeah, with me, it's kind of been just the opposite. It's like you push my buttons, I'm pushing back and I'm going after it. You know, and there's definitely that element out there that gets demonstrative of speaking about the subject with some people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What really happened to you, like in your early teens up to like early adulthood?
Oh, it has a real way of isolating you because, you know, I didn't necessarily believe in the subject, but something in the back of my head kept thinking, you know, there's something out there, something's going on. So like when I was 16, I was driving up the canyon with friends, and there you could see in the asphalt, there was definitely like something had skipped down the road. You know, you get this big old patch of asphalt taken off, and then, you know, 10 feet down the road farther, there's a smaller piece, and then 10 feet down the road farther, there's even a smaller piece. And it's like something had skipped down the road. Yeah. And I looked up at the trees above my head, and you could see something had just come crashing down through the trees because the limbs were broke. Yeah. And I'm looking at that, and the very first thing that goes in my mind is like UFOs. That's a UFO. And I freaked out for the rest of the day. I couldn't quite function right. So I would go up the canyons, especially after that incident I had when I was 14, and I was never ever comfortable. I mean, there would be times where I would just set out on my own for no particular reason whatsoever. It's like you're being called or something, and you take off. I would just like take off from the party, and I'd find myself crashing through the underbrush or something, and, you know, running away from what, I don't know, but it was just running away. And here is the weird part, because this happened probably about 3 times. The same guy in the same pickup would always show up to give me a ride. He was like in this brown beat up Chevy, him and this little friend right next to him who never said anything ever. And this guy had big old bushy blonde hair, and he would say, get in the back. You know, he would see me, say, get in the back, and I'd get in the back, and we'd take off. And that he's the same guy that picked me up that night I was abducted up to the canyons, 15 miles out from nowhere. You know, I just step out in the road. This is like Easter weekend. The canyons were empty on Easter weekend because everybody was doing their Easter thing down there, and it was like, you know, the weekend. Nobody actually went up the canyons on the Easter weekend. It was still kind of cold up there, and there's still some snow on the ground. And I stick my thumb out there. No sooner did I stick my thumb out, I'm going up a canyon in rural Utah, right? And I stick my thumb out, he shows up. And he gives me a ride up there, and they drop it off. And everybody's kind of, Don, how'd you get up here? I said, you know, at the time I was like, I can't remember. You know, it wasn't until I was 24 that it flashed back that this was the guy that kept picking me up all over the place. You know, mostly up in the canyons, up in the mountains. It's like, I take it that he is not normal, so to speak. So, but to this day, I don't know who he is.
Did anything happen to your mom or your brother?
Oh, I talked to Judy. Passed away a few years ago, but, you know, before I left Utah, I had a chance to talk with her, and I was just curious. So I said, hey, Mom, hey, what happened to this in this house in Spanish Fort that we used to live in? It was haunted, wasn't it? And she'd get really, really quiet. She said, don't talk to me about that house. I said, well, what went on there? What happened? So, I don't know, but I would put the clothes out on the line in the morning, and the next day they'd be folded up on the back porch all by themselves. I'm like, God, you gotta. That's the same that summer that I was having my experiences, and these got to be the friendliest aliens I've ever heard of, because they're folding the laundry up and folding it up and putting it on the back porch the next morning. I'm thinking, what? And she says, well, why did that happen? She says, I don't know, but I went out and bought a dryer, and I didn't use those clotheslines all for the rest of summer. I'm thinking, who does that? Just like in a rural town in Utah, you're folding up the laundry and putting it on the back porch. It's like, hey, your laundry's done. And so she did. I think she had a real issue with that, and I never really had the same relationship with her that everybody else had, and it kind of freaked me out a little bit, because it was like I was always kind of the kid over here, and I think she felt like she had an obligation to take care of me versus, this was her responsibility type of thing. It was a responsibility that she had to do, that I was not her child or something like that. And it's kind of strange, because I did the genealogy. I think I shared this on my blog site, where the background with her, and I've traced this back several times through, you go to the Mormon genealogy website, it's real easy to just trace somebody's genealogy back. So I've traced the genealogy back, and it always goes back to England, back in the 1400s, 1100s, as far as back as I can go. It's like in the 1300s or something like English, I'm thinking. So my dad's side of the family comes from, they're the old country Norwegian Scandinavians. Yeah. And my grandpa actually migrated over in the 30s to the US with my grandmother. And so the genealogy is like, set in stone that way. So I'd get a DNA test. And I'm curious about it. For some reason, I was just curious. There's no real specific goal in doing it. It just, hey, take a DNA test, $39.99 or something like that for one of the websites. So I go do it. I do the genealogy, and it comes up to where it's, maybe 2% English and 94% Scandinavian. And I just got it. I got the chart, and I looked at it. I said, oh, yeah, okay. 2 weeks later, I looked at it again. I said, wait a minute. If you have genealogy that goes back to England, where's my mom's side of the family, right? It's really, really bizarre. She's showing up genealogy why she's not there. So there must be a mistake. So I go down, I take another test through this place in Portland, and same results. I'm baffled by it. I look at this lady and I says, okay, well, what's going on here? How come this is not showing more of my mother's side of the genealogy site? She says, well, your mother looks like she's third or fourth cousin. Are you sure this is your mother? I'm like, I watched myself. Didn't say that, but watched myself being born. This is my mom, and biologically wise, there's a hospital records that say I was born to this lady. There's no doubt. But I'm no better than like a third or fourth cousin to her genetically. Yeah, and I don't know how. I had to kind of end everything right there, because she's passed on, and there's no real way to do any more genealogical work or DNA type of work on it. So I'm like, is there any other explanation? She says there is one way, where you have dual eggs that are there in the system, and one egg basically takes over the other egg that isn't fertile, and you can, there's a 1 in a few million chance that could be the case. I'm thinking, okay, was this a DNA from like a Nordic alien put into, I could very easily see to where The dad side is, yeah, okay, you got a different dad. He's over there somewhere, you know. She fooled around, yada, 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 you know. But it's like, I've got my father's DNA, but I've got no DNA from my mom. I don't know. I wish I could pursue it further. I mean, you know,
It is what it is.
it
Wow.
is what it is. I don't know. It kind of blew me away when I got that. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that brings up that I think she felt like I wasn't really hers, because that's kind of what I felt like when I was growing up. But I have a responsibility to raise you, and she always treated me different than the other kids of the family, and I feel no I feel no attachment to them at all whatsoever. It's like, I don't know who these people are. I was raised up in this strange household. I don't know any of these people.
Oh,
So yeah, so there was a difference there. She did treat me different. Yeah.
okay. I found out that on my grandmother's side, they turned out to be nobles in England, and on her bloodline, and the family the family line goes back up like to the Roman area, like
Oh, cool.
old English
Yeah.
before Anglo-Saxons. So it's a really old, but the bloodline actually means like friends of the shining ones, like Nephilim, Elohim. It's
Oh, that's really cool.
it's really
Yeah,
fascinating. Yeah.
that's really cool. Yeah.
So yeah, we do learn things about our family history. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So no, yeah, coming back to being in that outhouse, how did you know that there were grays outside?
Okay, I didn't for a long time. When, like I said, what happened was I come home from school one day. I have a bunch of friends at school, you know, on a Friday, decide, hey, we're gonna go camp. We're going up the canyons. We're gonna, you know, have a party up there. We get a keg. Is the Wyoming beer is coming down, which is, you know, much stronger than the Utah beer, you know. So they got some people coming down with some Wyoming beer. We're gonna go up the canyon. We're gonna have a party up there. Easter weekend, nobody's going to be up there. It's still kind of cold up in the mountains, and we actually got everything all planned out, got it together, and I come home and I tell Judy, I say, hey Judy, I'm going up the canyons, and she looked at me and she says, you what? She says, yeah, I'm going camping with some friends up in the mountains this weekend. She goes, I don't think so. And me being 14 says, you can't tell me, you know, I was like, you can't tell me what to do. Yeah. So she says, well, I gotta go down and pick your brother up from school. Be here when I get back. It's like the wrong thing to say. It's like, yeah, no, I don't think so. So I packed up a sleeping bag and just a down feathered jacket, and which was not nearly enough for the canyons up in the mountains of, you know, over the Easter weekend. And I took off. And it was just a short walk up through the fields to get up to the road that goes up the canyon, because there's nobody, you know, there's nobody, you know, it was just the way that it was. It was just a short walk to get the canyon road, because I missed the ride that everybody's going to meet someplace and we're going to drive up in this car. And, you know, I missed the ride because my mom had the nerve to hold me up, right? Like, yeah, Mom, no way. So I get up there, and who picks me up? This guy with the weird truck, you know, gets me right up there, and they see me walking up the road. And I tried to take a drink of alcohol and got my first taste of beer, and I got violently ill. So I think they did something to me. They must have, these are just conscious memories. I mean, this is what happened when I was 24. I had the instant recall. This is one of those things I instantly recall of what happened up there, you know. So I'm pretty sure that they gave me something so that I wouldn't imbibe, and I'd be straight and I would be sober when they wanted to come up. Because that first night, I didn't have any fun at all. I was over the creek, you know, I took like 2 sips of beer out of a cup, and I was over there, you know, hurling for half the night. I mean, something was really bad. So I just sat over there. I tended the fire all night. And the next day comes around. Everybody's just having a good old time. I'm sitting over there by myself tending the fire. It's like, you know, I'm thinking about heading home, you know, just walking back down the canyon, even though it's 15 miles, you know. I figured I'm not having any fun here. I can't get a ride. I'll just leave. And about the time I was saying that, it was getting a little bit dark. I hear the police coming up the canyon road because it's quite a ways to get to the campground that we're at. And you can see the police and my stepfather's car driving up the road. I take off, I hide up the mountain. I take off, I'm sober enough. I take off up the mountain, up the side of the road, clear up the side of the road so that they can't find me, right? And I'm looking at them clear everything out of the camp and take off, and I'm up there by myself, right? And so I actually started go down the campground after everybody's gone, and it's getting dark and starting to get cold. I'm thinking, God, I got to get a fire built, right? And there's nothing to build a fire with. They took all my matches. I left my matches sitting on the counter, on the table, I should say, the picnic table right there. They took all those matches. The fire was just out 100%. There's nothing I was going to be able to do to keep warm. So I just said, well, I guess I'll just start walking. I don't know what else to do, even though I'm 15 miles up the canyon by myself and there's nobody there at all, just me. I'm going to start walking. So I start walking down the road and I hear like the pine needles and stuff crunching off to the side of me, something walking through the brush. And I'm thinking, there's something out there, And so I take off running because I'm a little bit spooked because something is on both sides of the road that's coming towards me. And I'm thinking, this instant flash in my head pops in, it says coyotes. So I take off running and I get like 300 or 400 yards down the road, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this can't be coyotes because they would be yiping and chasing me and all this kind of stuff. You know how coyotes really let up a racket when they're chasing something? So it's not coyotes. I don't know what it is. And so I stopped. I can't hear anything, so I just start walking down the road a little farther, and I hear it kind of coming up to me on each side of the road again, and I start freaking out. I think, okay, what do I do? Climb a tree? What do I do? So I take off running again, and another image pops into my head: skunks. And my dog had an experience with skunks earlier that summer, and it just is, how that smells. It's like if you've ever run into a skunk, it's terrible. And so I'm getting a picture of a herd of skunks stopping me down the road, surrounding me, their tails up in the air, saying, hey, stop, you can't go any farther, type of thing. And I think that was a message. So I just locked myself I just ran straight to the house and sat down in the corner, even though it was cold as all get out. It's like a refrigerator in there. And I stuck my head down by the vent next to it. I could hear all these scuffling and stuff going around on the outside of the outhouse. And I'm thinking, well, I'm safe. They're not going to get me right there. So I wrap myself up with as much tissue paper as I can, trying to keep warm because I'm shivering over in the corner. I'm just like, it's really, really cold. It's like maybe 40 degrees or something up there. All I got's a down jacket with no sleeves, and I'm trying to keep warm. And I figured, well, let's see if this will keep me warm because that's all I had, right? And then the next thing I remember, this is just from conscious memories. It's just without the help of when I was 24, I had that incident, that past life incident. What I remember as a 14-year-old at the time in real time was waking up at 10 o'clock in the morning and the sun is shining down on me, and the tissue paper is piled up in a neat little pile off in the corner. And I'm walking all kind of dazed and confused because, it was too cold to sleep. I was literally shivering over there in the corner, but here it is, 10 o'clock in the morning, and the sun is shining and it's bright, and there's nothing out there. And I'm like, it was all kind of like, well, what happened? I get down the canyon, I'm telling my friends, they laugh at me and say, Don, so I just shut up after that. That's what you do. You just, okay, I'm getting ridiculed for having this thing happen to me. So I'm not gonna talk about it. So I didn't talk about it at all till I remembered the whole thing when I was 24. And what happened was, I was sitting in the outhouse shivering, wrapped up in this tissue paper in the corner, hearing the shuffling going on, which was actually the grays milling around. There's a whole bunch of them. They're all milling around all over the place, you know, just kind of doing their thing. And the door just kind of opens up, and in comes my gray, who was with me my whole life. And he looks at me, and I open my eyes, and I get up, and we go onto the ship, and we take off. And that's exactly how that went down. I didn't remember what actually happened until I was 24, and all this past life stuff pops in my head. It's like, and that was really weird, because there's also an incident that popped in my head that I never knew about, never had any idea about whatsoever. It's where 4 of us were sleeping out in the front yard of the house overnight during summer. You know, 2 friends and my little brother and me were out in the front yard sleeping, looking at the stars in the sky, you know, because there were shooting stars going on that night. It was a really big night for shooting stars. So eventually we all just kind of drop off to sleep. And sometime during the night, I wake up, and one of my other friends, the younger friend, I'll call him James, was piling grass under his brother's face, you know, just like, you know, he just picking grass up, piling onto his face. I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "He won't wake up." "What do you mean he won't wake up?" And he leans over his ear and he yells in his ear his name, his brother's name. He just, you know, just yelling in his ear, and he won't wake up. He said, "Look," he slaps his face and nothing happens. You know, this is his way of just irritating his brother, you know, trying to get him up. Because his brother is older, he's bigger, he's kind of a tough guy. So he's not waking up. And I thought, God, that's really weird. He said, "Yeah, let's go down to my house," right? So we get out of our sleeping bags. It was summer. We put on our shoes. We walk down to his house, and we're sitting out on the front porch eating an apple. And in that area, you left the screen door, you left the door open in your house, and you left the screen door open as well, so the air would flow through the house because it was hot. And this is the wind that come down to cool everything off. But we're sitting there on the porch eating apples, and we're looking up in the sky at the stars because there's some shooting stars going on. And as we're sitting there, we noticed that this big ball of light just goes flying across the sky. And it was just like a big old plasma ball or something. It goes flying across the sky, and it kind of explodes. And we both look at each other and say, "Yeah, that's cool. What is that?" Yeah. And then there's another one that flies across, and then another one, and another one. It's this big orange ball of light just flying across the sky. And pretty soon there's a whole bunch of lights flying across the sky, plasma type of balls. And we're looking at it thinking that it was like the 4th of July, because there's just like fireworks going off up there. And then all of a sudden, this is really weird. It's like poking, like if you have something come up out of the water and it just kind of pokes up and you get the edge of it, you see the edge poking up, and then it just keeps on coming up. And you can see everything just starts to come up out of the water. It's like this, except it just came out of nowhere in the sky. You could see this ship, the edge of a round edge of a ship just sort of poking from nowhere out into the sky. And these balls were flying around it like plasma balls. And it just kept coming out farther and farther and farther. And that's kind of really getting our attention at the fireworks. And before long, you see this big ship sitting out there across the field, excuse me, across the street in the field in front of the house. There's this big ship just sitting there. And we're just both staring at it going, "What?" You know, because we're both about 10 at the time. And we drop our apples, and we see this little gray being floating towards us. And the porch we're sitting on the edge of the porch, and there's a little lawn right there, and there's an irrigation ditch that ran in front of the house, and then the road, and then the field across the street. And we see him coming towards the road. He's coming through the field, but he's just floating through the field. And he looks at me and he says, "Run." So we both burst into the house, and we lock the door, and he runs over and he hides behind the TV. There's a TV in the corner, and he's hiding behind the TV back there. And I run straight back to his dad's bedroom, and I go to his dad's bedroom, and it's all lit up. You could see it was just really lit up. And I'm looking down at his face, and he's lying in bed, and I'm shaking him. I'm saying, get up, help us, help us, help us, get up, you know? And he's not moving. And I'm thinking to myself, why isn't he moving? He's not doing anything. Right? So I run back in the room and says, I can't get your dad up. And he's looking at me, he says, hide. So I jump down behind the chair that's in front of the screen. You walk through the door, and then there's an armchair right there. And I'm hiding behind the armchair. I'm peeking my head up, looking through the screen door, seeing where this gray thing is. And then that's as far as my conscious memory will go without hypnotherapy, without therapy of some sort, regression therapy. And we wake up the next morning, and his brother's face has got grass all over the front of it. And he's waking up, and he's saying, James, what did you do? He said, I didn't do anything, man. So it was real. I've never knew that event happened until that. And there's a lot of other events that just popped up like that. It was just conscious that I remembered all this stuff. And that was one that was brand new. I never knew that would happen. And I'm just sitting up in bed going, whoa. Because it just pops into my head at once.
Now, why would one of your two friends be conscious and not the other one? And why would the dad be also paralyzed or in sleep mode? So
that's a really good question. I don't know. It's like, I will tell you, when I had what I call my near, I don't know what you call it, near-death encounter experience, whatever you want to call it. When I was actually set back into the living room with my son, and he had a little friend that was with him as well, who later turned out to be somebody he met in school, who just moved into the area. That when we were standing in the living room of that, so like our room was downstairs, and up above us is the living room with a big old plate glass window. As I'm looking into the room, I'm looking around the room, there's about 7 or 8 other people in the room with us. Okay, and they're all kind of comatose, but me and my son and this little friend. And him and his little friend were just kind of tussling with each other, and I was just kind of looking around the room, and everybody was standing there. I mean, there's a married couple who were prominent in the community. He was actually the sheriff, the town policeman at the time. He was one of the big guys in town. Him and his wife were actually just like facing each other like this, and they were comatose, and they were just staring at each other. Everybody was naked, and they were just staring at each other. Nobody was moving, and it was the oddest thing. I remember to this day that you could see these lights flashing through the big pane window that we had in the living room, in that room. And the red and the blue was just flashing off their faces. It was like strobe lighting off them. And I can remember looking over them, and to this day, I could see them both staring at each other, just kind of comatose. Nobody was saying anything or doing anything. And I am aware that there were other people in the room. I don't know who they were, but we're all just standing around. Nobody seemed to be responsive to anything. And then I wake up in my bed. It's like, I don't know why they were comatose, I wasn't, but it seemed to happen a bit during the early years of the experiences I was having. Later on, like I say, during this, when I had this praying mantis encounter, we were all very conscious of what was going on. Okay, so something definitely changed between then and between this other experience I had, which was like, 15 years down the road. When I was 24, I was kind of getting into, that's the age where I was born again. I was a single parent to a 4-year-old boy, and I was kind of born again Christian type of thing, so I was doing the whole religious thing. And I was kind of interested in ghosts and where ghosts came from and spirits and that kind of thing. I'm thinking, So I'd go to the library and I'd bring up some books on it. I'd study about it and like Bermuda Triangle and stuff like that. That was kind of cool. I'm thinking, God, what happened to all these ships and all this kind of stuff? But UFO stuff for me was like, that was some sort of evil type of ploy or something. I was like, yeah, no, those guys are off the rocker. They don't know what they're talking about. And I can remember shutting the TV off. This was like in June of 1984. Okay. And I can remember watching Leonard Nimoy's Beyond Belief or whatever it was, where they're talking about the Bermuda Triangle. And I had to go to school the next day at 6 o'clock. It was like 11 o'clock. So my son he was sleeping right next to me. Right. And he had we were sharing a room in my mom's basement. And at the time, because that's where I was at. And he had a mattress I'd lay out on the floor for him. He'd sleep on the mattress. Right. And I was woken up in the middle of the night and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then I see him, he's down there by the side of the mattress. He's pushing a truck back and forth. There's a little toy truck that I bought him. It was a Jeep. He had completely forgot about it. It had been sitting up on the shelf for like a year and it was covered with dust. That's how much it was being used, right? It was covered with dust. It was one of those things where the box is more important than, even though it's a remote control car, so the box is pretty cool, but I don't know if I want the Jeep, So I just set up there on the shelf and it was collected dust. And he was pushing this Jeep back and forth next to his bed. I'm thinking, what are you doing up? And then I get the impression that there's something else in the room. And I look over in the corner and there's a gray who's floating there. Right. And he's looking at me and he points down to my son, like, we would like to take him. I'm thinking, well, you're not taking him by himself. I'm going with you, because I recognized him at that stage. I says, no, I'm taking him with me, and then that way he'll know everything's cool and it's all right, because we had this connection. And we're like, oh, okay. So he takes us on the ship. Well, first off, I grab my son by the hand and we just start floating. This is the part where I said we float through the wall, we float through the ground, we float through the cement steps on the other side. And we're going up into a beam towards a ship that was big old, and maybe about 40 feet wide. It was hovering in the air above the field across the street from us. And it was sitting there. And as we're going into it, it's like everything was just dead quiet. It was like you couldn't hear anything. It's like you could drop a pin from 30 miles away and you'd be able to hear it type of thing. It's just dead still. It's like walking into a vacuum. And I'm looking at this ship and it's got the red and the blue lights just twirling around the outside. This is your typical craft. It's got this little thing on top of it. It looks like a bowl set on top of a Frisbee or something, right? And it was sitting across the street from us, and you hear this and the lights were flashing off the roofs of the house next door to us. And I could see that very plainly. And I couldn't hear the crickets. There was no breeze blowing. It was just like walking in a vacuum, dead silent. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, where's the dogs barking? Because this is the country. Everybody's got a dog. They're always barking at night. You always hear a dog at night doing something. And there's no dogs. You couldn't hear a cow. You couldn't hear a sheep. You couldn't hear nothing, because there's a farming community and there's nothing there. And I'm looking ahead and I see the telephone wires across the street between us and the craft, and the beam's actually going through the wires. And we're approaching this wires. I'm thinking, my God, we're going to get electrocuted, man. I'm kind of backing away, but I can't force myself down out of the light. It's dragging me through, and we get through the lines, and you feel this little tingling going through your body. And that's where I was talking to you earlier. It's like your body just starts tingling a little bit when you're going through, and it kind of tickles. And you get through, and you get on the ship, and then once I'm on the ship, I'm meeting up with this lady who is, she's very beautiful. She got whatever reason, I'm thinking she's got brown hair, okay, and these really dark, penetrating eyes. And it's like I've known her forever. I mean, I just felt very comfortable with her, you know. And we're walking around what looks like the outside of a ship of some sort, right? And we're walking around the outside of the ship, and it's like on this rubber mat, sticky mat type of stuff. And we're walking around, and I'm looking at her, and I was having some severe digestive issues at the time. I'm looking at her, and I said, can't you, how about you just cure this for me? Okay, I've got this situation going on. Can't you guys just cure this for me? Can you help me get rid of this? Yeah. And she looks at me and stares at me and just laughs. And now I'm really hurt. I'm thinking, man, you're laughing at, what are you laughing at me for? You know? And she says, don't worry, you're going to be okay. And she puts her hand on my shoulder and says, you'll be okay. That minute, it was like, oh, yeah, of course. You know, and I forget about it. It's like, it's out of my memory. And we're walking around the ship farther, and there's this arched doorway. Now, you got to remember that this is a typical type of ship where everything is really bright, silvery type of polished silver type of stuff, right? And there's this arched doorway right there. And I'm looking, we stop, we look through the doorway, and I see my son with this little kid standing next to a vertical pole that's going up through the ship. And there's a catwalk down around the outside of it, right? So you got this vertical pole, there's like a catwalk around a 10-foot diameter around it, and they're standing next to it, and they've got what looks like a shower massage. That's the closest thing you think. And they pull it out, and it's attached to a line to this column, and he holds it over his head, and you can see this like blue electricity just goes through his body. It hits the catwalk, and it dissipates through the catwalk, and he laughs. And the other kid grabs it, and he holds it over his head and does the same thing, and they're laughing, you know, and this is like, I don't know what it's doing. Maybe it's just like, but the thing is really funny. It must feel real funny going over the bodies or something, right? And they're laughing about it. They're fighting over this. And I think this is just her way of saying, hey, look, they're okay. Don't worry about it. They'll be all right. Yeah. And then we just continue on around the ship. And she shows me this woman who will be instrumental in my life. And she said, she looked at me, she says, this woman's going to change your life. I said, okay, you know, whatever. And I met her, you know, a few years ago, and she pretty much did, you know, just exactly what she said. So it was not there at the time. It was, I'm not sure if it was a holograph or whether she was actually there or not, but I think she probably was there on the ship. And excuse me, I had a freak out over excuse me, for the next probably year. I would just kind of unconsciously I'd freak out and meet a girl like that, and I'd see her off in the distance, and I would just kind of freak out, and I'd just gravitate toward her immediately, you know, making a fool out of myself, so to speak, until I was able to put two and two together. It says, oh, I'm associating with this with a woman I met on the ship, right? And then once I associated that behavior stopped because it was getting kind of weird. Yeah, it was a kind of, I don't know, it was a weird situation. But once I realized what was happening, I quit. I said, okay, that's that. I understand where that's coming from. The next thing I remember is where I'm sitting in, it looks like somebody's garage, and I can look, we're sitting at one end, the door is on the back of the garage, and I'm standing next to the door with my gray. I don't know his name, I just call him my gray. And he's pointing to the shadow figure that's kind of looks like if you have one of those duck things at the carnival or something that floats across the screen, you're supposed to shoot it with the guns, and it goes back the other way, and you know, it was doing the same thing. It was just bouncing back and forth. There was a shadow figure that was bouncing back and forth. And it looked like these people had just moved in because you had some boxes off to the side. And so it looks like they'd been packing boxes or unpacking boxes or something. And he points to this thing, and I hear his voice echo in my head. It is forbidden to pass through those. Yeah. So I'm taking it that now looking back on it, I'm taking it that what he is saying is you don't want to inhabit the same space with them. It's like a possession. Okay. So he's saying, don't mess around with those things. They're no good. I was in somebody's house somewhere. I think actually it was a house down the street from where we were living, because I knew that somebody had just moved in there. But there was only like 4 or 5 houses in the area. So I'm thinking it was local, you know, and he was showing me this shadow figure. That was the whole purpose, is just to show me the shadow figure. So he shows me the shadow figure, and it's like, don't share the same space with this. That was kind of his way of saying, don't do this. Okay, because he knew I was going to have the ability to be able to do the shaman-like stuff. So this happens, and then the next thing I remember, we're standing in the living room. This is the incident I was just talking about, where we're standing in the living room, and I'm looking through the screen door, and I can see the ship across the street, and it's doing the humming thing, and the lights are strobing, and everybody's in the room standing there comatose, except for me, my son, and his friend who are on the love seat right next to me, and they're just kind of tussling with each other, doing their kid thing, right? And the next thing I know, boom, I'm popped up. I just feel myself just dropping in my bed, and I pop up, and I'm going, oh my God, because I have this instantaneous memory of all these other events that had happened. And that's when I was 24. It's like, okay, wow, this, like, it just totally blew my mind, because it's like, hey, you know, God doesn't let this stuff happen to people. So what's going on? I had no idea what was happening. So I'm calling Alan Hynek. Dr. Hynek had just set up a Center for UFO Studies back in Illinois, I believe it was, Chicago, I think is where he was working at. And so somehow I managed to get his number, and I'm calling him back, and I'm saying, look, I've had this experience. And at this point, I'm hiding down in the corner of the house with a wireless phone while nobody's home, in the corner, saying, I've had an experience. Oh, you God. It was freaking me out. I didn't know what to do. He says, okay, well, Alan didn't actually answer the phone, but one of his assistants did, probably one of his work, you know, somebody hired out through the college. He said, okay, draw it down, you know, give us a description and send it to us. He gave me an address and send it to us, and we'll call you back. Never heard anything about it. I tried calling back a couple of times, never got any answer, never heard anything about it. So for 13 years, I just dropped it. I said, I don't know. I have no idea what to do with this, because this is totally, it just totally blew my mind. What do you do? There's nobody to talk to in a small farming community like that. It's just a very religious, conservative community. And so if I'm talking about this, they're probably going to lock me up, or they're going to give me some sort of medication or something to tell me I'm crazy, you know? So I couldn't go to my ecclesiastical leader and say, hey, you know, I've had this experience. You say, no, it's evil, and we got to exercise you or whatever, you know. I knew it happened, because I still remember that just like it was yesterday. You know, all the details, everything like that, just come back to me right now, just as clear as they did when it happened. You know, so, and then there are experiences that happened after that. As far as my son goes, he was telling me about these bizarre dreams he had last night, and how he had the scoop mark. He said, my leg is bleeding. He had a scoop mark on the back of his leg. And, you know, I just totally freaked out over it. It's like having your brain scrambled. It's because you have your little box right here, and this is your life, and this is what you believe in, and you're comfortable right here in your box. Now there's no box, and there are all these questions, and you don't have any idea where to turn to, who to go to find any kind of answer. So you kind of got to go inside. And that's where you find your answers, is by going inside. But the more questions you have, the more doors you unlock, the wider that universe gets. And after a while, you realize there really aren't any answers.
Now, did you wake up ever with scoop marks yourself?
You know, I don't ever remember having scoop marks myself. No, I know he did. That one time is all I remember, but it healed up really, really fast. It was like, you know, I put a Band-Aid on it and 2 days later it was gone. So it's the bleeding had stopped and everything. So I don't, that's the only time I ever remember, have a conscious memory. I have woken up with bruises all over the place. And it's like, you know, kind of like I'd get a little round bruise on my arm on one side, maybe a couple of bruises on the other side, or a couple of pinpricks in my arm, or, you know, that kind of thing. And that's like, I don't know where they came from or how they got there. I just wake up one morning and they would be there. You know, so that's, I did have an experience where maybe 12 years ago, it felt like I was being dropped in my bed. And this is in a place I was living at in Utah. And where I was staying at, there was a walk-in closet without a door. It's just off right to the left-hand side of me. And I felt like I was getting dropped in my bed, and I opened my eyes and I look over to this closet, and instead of closet, what I'm seeing is this arched doorway. And on top of it, there's a little clamshell that's glowing. Okay, and I can look into my closet. It's not my closet. I can see somebody walking away from me. And he's walking away into what looks like a ship or something, right? Or into another room. I mean, my closet wasn't there. It was another room. The rest of the room looked fine. It's just that closet area. And then the clamshell started to fade out. I mean, it's like the light started to go out on it. And as that light went out, it disappeared. It was my closet again. And so that kind of thing happens from time to time. But, you know, situation has definitely changed quite a bit. So
Getting back to that lady that you've met on board the craft, how
yeah.
tall was she, and was she wearing anything special?
She was like about 6 feet tall. And what I remember her wearing was, it was kind of odd. It was like this camouflage suit. It was like a orange and brown kind of a suit type of thing that was kind of a splotchy camouflage looking. And it had long sleeves on it, and it looked like it was a very form-fitting type of thing. It fit her body very well. And she's very fit, very, you know, but it was not how I would normally associate. You know, you'd think they'd be wearing this blue suit or something like that, but hers was kind of a camouflage brown and orange type of thing. I'm like, wow, that's weird.
What's your relationship with that Gray you've been talking about? Is he like your mentor, your teacher, your guide?
For a long time, I think he was my kind of like a teacher. You get these guys and they carry down with you. He's one that has shown up, I would guess, during my formative years, and he's always been around. And then it kind of shifted to where there's this Nordic guy who's been around. He's a no nonsense type of dude. He'll look at you. He shows up every once in a while when I need him, kind of thing. Like for instance, I was really, really sick with bronchitis. Excuse me. And I was working long hours. It was winter. I was working all over, you know, the state. Utah's a big state. And so I was all over the state. And I wasn't taking care of myself quite like I needed to. So I'd get bronchitis and then go away for a couple of weeks. I'd get bronchitis and go away for a couple of weeks. And finally, I just decided I need to take a little time off work, right? Because I was an independent contractor, thinking, yeah, I got to refuse some work for a couple of days and just take some time off because I got to get over this. So I'm sitting in bed, probably about the second day. I'm just kind of sitting in my bed. It's like early morning, or maybe it was later on in the afternoon. It's probably later on in the afternoon. I'm just sitting in bed doing what I call an open eye meditation, just staring at the wall. And the wall kind of gives way. He walks in, and he's got this little pink vial that he's carrying with him. He's holding it over his chest, and he reaches out and he hands me this vial, and I just like, I drink it. I don't drink it. I kind of absorb it. You know, I stick it up in my mouth and it absorbs into me. And I hand it back to him. He turns around and he walks back through the wall. Now, the only thing he ever said was, drink this. That's it. And he's very stern. He's got this look in his eyes like, you know, I could see right through you. The first time I saw him, it was very intimidating. It was like, oh my God, this guy is like, you know, too much. He turns around, he walks back through the wall, and he's gone. And I turn down, I go back, I suddenly turn over and I go back to sleep. I go to sleep for like, you know, the rest of the night. And the next morning I wake up, I'm fine. I'm all cleared up, everything's fine. No more lung problems, nothing. I'm ready to go. And I've never had a cold since then. Never had bronchitis problems since then. It's been like, that was 20 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that. So he shows up at these opportune moments and says, here. He doesn't really say much. He walks through, says hi or something, and lets me know he's there, and he's gone.
You've sent me an image of a mantid in the forest.
Yeah.
So when did that happen?
Oh, that probably happened back in 1998 or 99. It was July. And that was kind of a weird little, wow, that was an amazing experience. But this was up around Skinwalker Ranch, up in the mountains of northeastern Utah. I don't know if you're familiar with Skinwalker Ranch. There's a little town called Fruitland that's where we had this incident at. And that picture that I sent you is actually in Fruitland. Okay, that's an actual, maybe about a mile from the site that we had it. So it was in that kind of a country. And that's very similar to what they look like, except the back of it looked more like an ostrich. So I don't think I got the back of it quite like I wanted it to. I'm just not very good at Photoshop. So, excuse me. So we had actually gone up there. There's like 7 or 8 of us originally. Okay, we went up there one weekend, and we had this was kind of a shamanic type of thing. We had a shaman come up from New Mexico who is friend with my mentor, who is also trained in the shamanic studies as well. And we were going up to Fruitland to visit another individual who was a shaman, basically a shaman type of guy. And so we all got together, we go up there, we were staying at a friend's trailer up there. And this is a really rural area. So, you know, it's like you have the trailer, but it's setting on bedrock. And the bedrock is like maybe, you know, 50 or 60 feet deep. So they can't build the lines in for the water and the sewer and that kind of stuff. So you just have the trailer there, and then you got to pipe your own water in, or they have out near the road, the main road, they do have a tap that you can go get your water at that tap. So you go down there, you fill up your jugs of water, you bring it over to the trailer, and around out back is where they have, most places would have an outhouse. You know, they got a little trail going through the cedars out to the outhouse. And this is cedar country. It was way up, it's up probably about 6,500 feet. I'm thinking 6,000 feet. It's something pretty high. And so we just kind of get together as a group, and we go up to Fruitland to meet this other shaman, and we have we get together, we have a little ceremony, and we go back to the trailer. And when we're sitting at the trailer, I mean, the weather is really good. We're just sitting out there at night drinking coffee. We look up there, we see what we think is the moon. Okay, it's really, really big, and we're all looking at it saying, wow, man, the moon is so big, you know? Everybody's remarking about how big the moon looks, and one of them says, excuse me, someone in the group says, yeah, man, that moon's always bigger up in the mountains, right? So yeah, you know, so we just sit around drinking coffee. All of a sudden, everybody decides, oh, we gotta go to bed, and we can't get to bed fast enough, right? Everybody just cleans everything up, and we all decide that we need to get to bed at the same time. So we all jump in bed and go to sleep. don't think anything about it. I'm sure that something went on. I don't know what it was, but I don't have regression. It's only 2 times in my life I've had regression in regards to my experiences like this. And this praying mantis one was one of them, but it was after the fact. So, but anyway, we see this big old moon in the sky, which we think is a moon. And we remark about it, and we go to bed, and we wake up in the morning, we get ready to leave, and it's like 10:30, and we look up in the sky, and there's a moon off to the east sky. Well, the moon was in the west sky, and it was a full moon earlier. Now it's a partial moon, and it's in the east sky, and it's coming up over the mountains. And I look up there, and I say, oh, hey, there's a moon. Yeah, everybody looks up and says, yeah, okay. And we never put 2 and 2 together for like about 5 or 6 weeks, and we think, hey, wait a minute, this is not, how do we have 2 moons at night on each different parts of the sky? So we're thinking that wasn't the moon. So anyway, that's just kind of how that night went. The only way I mentioned that is I think it was kind of preparatory for what happened 2 weeks later when we decided we go back up again. Now, originally we go up there with the intent of just sky watching and seeing if we can see some UFOs, because that country up there is really heavy with UFO activity. And so we're thinking, well, let's just go up and see if we can see some UFOs. And wouldn't it be cool if, there's something else that showed up, maybe some sort of an ET guy. Yeah, that'd be cool. Let's just throw that out there. And so we get up there during the night. I mean, as we're driving up there, let me back up a little bit. As we're driving up there, it's overcast. You can't see the sky. There's just a light drizzle every once in a while where you got to turn your windshield wipers on, but it's nothing serious to prevent us from coming around and coming home. So we just decided we're going to stick it out. So we get up there at night, and there's 4 of us. My shaman from New Mexico, me, my mentor, who's also a shaman, and the friend whose trailer we're staying in. Right? That's just the 4 of us up there that night. We get up there, it's overcast. We're all sitting out there, and maybe about 11 o'clock at night, just drinking coffee and chatting and having, just having a good time. We're not expecting anything because it's overcast. You can't see the stars. There's very little chance we're going to see any UFO activity. And we're just sitting there chatting, having a good time and talking about some spiritual stuff. And then you can see the stars start to shine through the clouds a little bit. Like, oh yeah, maybe something will happen tonight, because look, the sky's clearing up. It's like, but it didn't clear up all the way. It just cleared up in a circle over our heads, which is really kind of weird. And when it did that, you could feel the air kind of changed a little bit. I don't know if it was an air pressure thing or what. Maybe it was a portal opening. When I'm looking back at it, it could have been just a portal opening or something of that nature. And the sky clears out over our heads, but it's just over our heads, and it's like somebody had taken a biscuit cutter and just punched a hole through the clouds. And so it's just a perfect circle over our heads, and we're looking up there, and we can see all these stars shining, and it's just really, really brilliant. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. It's you got literally millions of stars up there in the sky, and it's like nobody's ever seen anything like this. And you can see this ship. It's a triangle ship up there, and it's kind of bouncing around inside this circle. And it'll come to the end of the circle and hit like the edge of the clouds, and it'll just bounce randomly around to the other side and then bounce back. And it was a real slow motion type of thing. I was watching the ship bounce around, and the clouds up in the stars up in the sky. And my shaman from New Mexico looks up there, and he's an astronomer. He's a amateur astronomer, and he's looking up there because sometimes he's out there doing at these ruins and stuff. And if he's out at night, he'll look up the sky and see where he's at based on the stars and know where he needs to go, right? So that's kind of how he traveled if he's out at night. Well, he's looking up the stars. He says, I don't recognize the sky. These stars are not familiar to me. I don't, there's no constellations up there. I'm like, what do you mean there aren't any constellations? He says, this is not the same sky that I usually look at night. So I says, I don't know what this is. Yeah. And it's like, huh, well, that's kind of weird. But I'm sitting there getting mesmerized by it all because it's just kind of putting me in a trance, and everybody else for that matter is kind of going in a trance-like state because it's just really amazing. And so the ladies decide, there are two ladies and two guys, and they both decide that they need to go to the restroom. So they're walking out back up. There's a little path, a stone path that you walk up to get back to the outhouse out back through the cedars. They're walking back up there, and all of a sudden you hear them laughing and giggling, and they, oh, what the hell is going on? And then they're calling us to come back and check out what's going on. And my friend leaves and he goes back to the backyard, and they all just kind of disappear and leave me sitting out there. And I'm just kind of hypnotized by the stars. I hear them yelling at me, like, hey, Doug, come on back. And I'm like, no, stop bothering me. I'm looking at this. Can't you see? This is just amazing. And finally I said, oh, all right, if I have to go back, I have to go back. So I walk around back, and they're standing in the path, and there's a rock edge along the cedars right there, and they're sticking their hand over the edge of the path and laughing and pulling their hand back real fast. I'm thinking, what are they doing? They say, here, come here, do this. Stick your hand out there. I said, why? They said, no, just stick your hand out there. So I do, and the temperature drops like about 10 degrees, And I did the same thing. I just jerked it back real fast. The minute I did that, you could immediately hear this chirping, this clicking. It's like all over the place. And you could see these figures. It's kind of like shadow figures, but they were the praying mantis, and they were like a group of three of them out there in the backyard running around, and they would turn to look at you, and they had these great big old red saucer eyes. And the ones that I was saying, it was like looking at a ghost, kind of. Okay, you could see them. They were like shadow figures, but their eyes were very real, and they had this shape, and they had figure to them. And it reminds me of one of the stories I was looking at on your Facebook, where somebody was saying that they were seeing the praying mantis in their house, but it was kind of like a shadow. I'm thinking, oh, yeah, that's the exact same thing that happened to us. So we see the shadow figures, the temperature drops, and it's like they're all running around, they're clicking, and you can see them moving around, you can hear them, and they're just running around all over the place, right? And they're doing their thing. They're not really paying much attention except just to turn and look at us every once in a while. And so we walk back to the front of the porch, and we sit down, and we're drinking our coffee. And my friend, she looks out at one of them that's standing. There's a burn pit there in the middle of the yard out in front of us, but we don't have a fire in it. We're just enjoying the night. And she looks out there, she sees what she says, I'm going to go out there and talk to this thing. I'm going to go out there and see if I can, make contact with it or do whatever. I say, I want to look this thing in the eye. So she walks down the porch, she walks out in front of it, and you could see him kind of reach out underneath her and lift her like about 3 feet off the ground and just kind of look her in the eyes. And her head kind of goes back, and her shoulders are crunched up like, she's being lifted. And then she just he just sets her back down on the ground, and she walks back up kind of dazed and confused. And she says, I said, well, what? And she said, it's like looking into the universe. And so she says, I looked in the eyes, I could kind of see the universe out there. It is really amazing. I think, well, no, I want to see what the hell is going on, right? Because, so I talked to her. I said, I'm going to go out back where we originally met these guys, where they showed up, and I'm going to ask them to show themselves to me. So I'll be back in a minute, right? So I walk back out the back, and I'm looking at a couple of them around. I says, show yourselves to me. I want to see what you really look like, because all I'm seeing is the shadows, and everybody wants to see what you really look like. And immediately I feel it walk up the side of me, and I could look up to it. I can, see these eyes kind of staring off in the distance. He says, do you want to see us? I said, yeah, I really want to see you. She says, you sure you want to see us? I said, yes, I really, really want to see you. I want to see what you look like in real life. You know, stop doing the shadow thing. He says, nope. And he turns around and he runs off. I'm thinking, what the hell? You know, what are you doing, guys? Right? You know. So I said, well, what does that? I turn around and walk back, drinking my coffee, and we just sit there, we're chatting and listening and run up and down the field, and you can hear their chirping, like clicking is what it was. And at this point, there's like maybe 3 sets of 3 of them out there. They were all over the place. Yeah. And you hear them just going, I don't know if it's like a sonar thing with them or something where they know where each other's at or what, but they were running up and down the road next to the side of that trailer. And we sat there for another half hour, 45 minutes. I said, okay, I'm going to appeal to these guys again. I want to see really, really want to see these guys, you know, because they're not really paying much attention to us. They're just running up and down the road, running around. I want to know what's going on. So I go back out there again. I said, okay, guys, I want you to show yourself. And the same one shows up next to me. And I could feel his arm kind of, his claw, his appendage, whatever you want to call it, settle over my shoulder. And I could literally feel it going from here to here. And there's this cold electrical energy just kind of melts down my back, down my spine, and all the way down through my tailbone. And that's the only way I could do it, is like this cold electrical energy type of thing. And he says, not yet, you're not ready to see us yet. And then he leaves, and he goes, and I go back around and sit down and said, well, this is just going to be a good ghost story because, you know, nothing's really happening, so to speak. So it's like going to a haunted house and you see ghosts running around, and it's just a story. And if that's all that happened, you know, if it ended right there, it's not really, I mean, it sounds sensational, but it's not really anything worthwhile, you know, chatting about, because even though 4 of us saw it, we all attest to it. It's, you know, just kind of a ghost story. Well, we sat out there for a little while longer. The clouds started to come back and the stars disappeared, and then they stopped running around. You didn't hear them anymore. And nobody said anything for about 45 minutes. We all just sat out on the porch drinking our coffee, you know, and I don't think anybody said a word that whole time. Yeah, and then all of a sudden it's like a couple of weeks before, it's like, we gotta go to bed. Everybody jumps up and just runs straight for the bed, and we have sleep bags out on the front porch, the guys do. We just crash out on the front porch. Sometime in the middle of the night, maybe it's about 2 or 3 in the morning, I am just profusely sweating, man. I wake up in my bag and it's like 45 degrees outside. It's kind of cool, but I am just pouring sweat. I'm burning up from the inside out. I can't sleep, man. I'm just feel like I'm burning up. I walk into the trailer and I lay down on the bed, open the window up above me, and it took me like an hour and a half for my body to cool off. Something had happened, and I wake up in the morning. I finally get to sleep. I wake up in the morning. I got cedar gum, needles, and, you know, dirt all over the bottom of my socks. And I'm like, what the hell happened, man? Because I don't sleep with my socks on. For some reason, I slept with my socks on, you know, that night, and which for me is very uncomfortable. But I did, and I woke up. They're sticking to the floor as I get up, and I'm like, I look at them and say, I got stuff all over the bottom of my socks. Yeah. And we just all kind of, at that point, we're all just kind of dazed out a little bit, and we just get it, clean everything up, and we leave. And so like I said, if that's where it ended, it's like, it's kind of a fanciful tale. It's like, whatever, you know. But 2 of us decided to go and have regression to figure out what actually is going on, you know, because we all had the impression that, hey, something else is happening, but we don't know because you know, whatever's happened has been blocked. So both two of us go and have the regression. We find a good hypnotherapist who's experienced in that field, and we have her regress us. And with my experience, what happens is I'm laying on the porch in my sleeping bag, and something wakes me up. It sounds like somebody's shutting the door. You know, the porch is kind of creaky, so if you walk across it, it moves a little bit. And I felt like it was moving and somebody had shut the door. Yeah, so I look up, open my eyes, and I look up, and I didn't see anybody. The light wasn't on in the trailer. I'm thinking, oh, you just must be having something weird going on here. And I feel something drawing me up the road. So I get up out of my sleeping bag and I walk up the road. And as it goes up around maybe about a quarter of a mile, and then there's a big ravine right there on the side of the road. And hanging over this at the edge of the ravine is this door. And it's got this Greco-Roman type of columns going next to it. And it's got an arch on it. And in the middle of the arch is the same thing that I've described earlier. There's like this little clamshell right there on the top of the arch, and it's lit up and it's bright. So some sort of, I don't know why they picked a clamshell design, but that's what they had. And it's all lit up, and I can look into the door, and it's kind of got this, if you're looking across the water and you see the sun shining off of the water, if it's a calm day and you see water is calm, you see the sun shining off it, and it's a whole bunch of different colors, kind of glistening, iridescent. That's the way this door was. And this praying mantis guy I met earlier was standing next to me, and I could finally see him, you know, the whole shape. I could actually see the color, what he looked like. And he had, his eyes weren't actually red, but they were really big. They're definitely like praying mantis bug eyes. And he did have the appendages which came across. He had these little feather, really light feather structures down, like kind of like down feathers, except really light. And they were shining down on his, they were hanging down on his arm, and he had some on the side of his body. He had this little aperture, it's kind of like gills on the bottom side of his body, you know, what you call his thorax, I guess. And he's brown and white. He's kind of a brownish, tannish color, you know, tannish white color. Is just really pretty, really beautiful looking thing. And you can almost just jump on his back and ride him. You know, I mean, that kind of like an ostrich type of a shape to him, you know. And I don't think, though, like I said, my Photoshop thing that I did him any justice. And he kind of motioned me into this door. So we're walking in this door, and the minute we walk through, we're on a ship someplace. And you could tell it's one of the big triangular ships that you hear about people having experiences on the triangle ships. And we're on this triangle ship, and going towards each corner was a catwalk. And these three catwalks kind of joined in the center, and there's a podium sitting on top with a little red ball that had, you know, it was kind of like that, you know, like the spot thing, yeah. And the impression that if you put your hand down, you can put your hand down like that, and it would fit right into that impression that's on the ball. And down below us, there's a big orange ball that's just kind of floating. And I would tell you, if you've seen one of these praying mantis ships, it usually has, or not praying mantis, one of these big triangle ships, it usually has a ball of some sort in the center. Well, this one was kind of an orange ball, and it was kind of just floating there. And I'm taking it's maybe the energy source or something. I don't know. And off on each corner, it had a white light. Yeah. And so he takes me to the center. We're directly over this orange energy source. And I put my hand on there. I could see immediately there's this holographic image of me and my life. And I'm taking this probably future events that are going to happen. And And I'm looking at him and said, well, what's this? What's this about? And he looks at me and he goes, it's deja vu. I'm thinking, oh, okay. Well, he's showing me events of the future that I'll remember, I guess. And that kind of happened when I was 16. I mean, I had deja vu about where I was going to live, and I'm there right now. So it's like, okay, I kind of get that. You know, I didn't really question him, but it was like, okay. So we walked down the catwalk and we entered into this other room. And right in front of us, there's this door that's maybe about 10 feet tall, and it's maybe about 4 feet wide. And we both walk in. It moves. It kind of just gives way. It just like opens up, and we walk into it, and it closes behind us. And you can see this. Looks like this big old camera eye that's up in the ceiling, up in front of us, up on top. You know, it's not in the ceiling, but it's in the wall up near the ceiling. And it has this laser that kind of scans down over us. It's a purple kind of laser that just kind of scans down me and goes back up again. And it kind of wraps me up in this laser type of thing and just scans up and down me. And again, I look at him, I say, well, what's this? What's this doing? And you can tell he's having a hard time formulating how to relay this information to me that I'm asking for. And he goes, finally he goes, soap, 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 soap. You know, he's just really excited that he has found some term to relay this to me. So it's some sort of cleaning laser, cleaning apparatus to either disinfect the body or detangle it, or maybe any attachments or something. I don't know, but it's a cleaning apparatus of some sort. And as soon as it stopped, this door off the left-hand side opens up, and we're walking into this other room. And the thing that catches my mind is there's this great big old wall out in front of us that's crystal clear, and it's looking out into space. And you could just, we're out in the universe someplace, and you could see this really, really cool looking view of space. There are stars out there, and it was really amazing, you know. And off to the one hand, off the left-hand side, there's a kidney-shaped table. And around this kidney-shaped table, there's 26 other people. I was at number 27. Okay, so there's 27 of us all together kind of gathered around this table. And the minute I step into the room, there's this ball in the middle of the table. It's sitting on, it's a crystal ball, great big crystal ball, and it's sitting in the middle of the table on a pedestal of some sort. It's like, it's got 4 sides to it, and it comes up at an angle like this. And the ball is sitting on top, and the angles, it kind of wraps around the ball a little bit to hold it in place, but it's got this crystal ball sitting there. And you can see, it must have been like the energy from each one of us, our spirits or whatever, all just come out of our bodies, from the top of our heads, out of our bodies into this ball. We all mix up. It's just like everybody just kind of swirls around in this ball, like we're all becoming attached to each other or something, like we're one. And then boom, it kind of explodes back out, back into each one of us. Yeah. And maybe it's versions of me or something out there, I don't know, but they were kind of humanoid looking individuals. There's a couple that were kind of, no, I get the impression we're not humanoid. And it's like mixing all our energies up together is what it was doing. The next thing I remember, we're sitting on top of the ship. And there's a great big canopy there. And he's sitting off the right-hand side. I'm sitting off to the left. And we're sitting in this canopy. It's this huge canopy. And it's like a glass canopy. And we can see in 300, all over the place, you know. We're just opening the universe. I mean, you look up and you can see nothing but stars. And he looks at me, he says, would you like to see? Like, yeah, I'd love to see. You know, of course, why not? You know, I said, yes. And the minute I said yes, everything just disappears. And it's like I'm floating in space all by myself. There's like nothing anywhere around. And at that moment, you could kind of hear this. It's kind of like music. It's like a tone to the universe. It's just like floating out there. It's got its own kind of a tone to it. And the only way to describe this is if like, I'll say like if you feel a wind blowing and it blows through your body and you can feel it blowing through every cell of your body and it just goes through you and you can feel this wind as it blows through you. It's kind of like that. You get this tone, this musical tone that just flows in your body, it flows through you, and you can feel it through your whole body, like every cell is touched by that. And I'm sitting there listening to it for a minute, and then it disappears, and I'm back into the ship. And I wake up. Next thing I remember, I'm waking up and I'm just pouring sweat. I'm just like burning from the inside. And I think that came from hanging over the top of that energy center. That may have had some sort of effect on me and why my body was burning up like it was. Yeah, so, and why it took so long for it to actually just cool down, and maybe that's why they didn't interact in our environment totally like I want them to, because maybe they just couldn't handle it or something. There's that kind of interdimensional thing going on. I don't know. You know, so if you added that onto everything that happened before, then yeah, now this becomes a story, because there's like, wow, this amazing experience that happened with these praying mantis. And that is one of those times, that's only one of two times where I've ever regressed to find out what was going on. And this was just, it was much more than I anticipated it to be.
You've had these, let's say, pre-life memories. Like, were you a gray before coming to into this body right now? What were you?
I'm not really sure. I knew I'm from out there someplace. You know, I'm not sure where, but you know, I think we all are stardust of some sort. We're all connected to these other realms. It's just a matter of if that's what we want to remember when we come to this planet. Because I firmly believe, and in fact, I've seen that there is kind of a heaven realm, okay? And that heaven realm is for these earthbound beings to go to kind of recalibrate themselves. If they want to stay attached to this planet, they can do that, you know. But if you want to break away from that, you can go out here, because I do this thing which I call consciousness sharing, from, you know, what they call consciousness sharing. Okay, for years I was trying to figure out what it was, and then I come across a couple of people who do remote viewing and kind of quiz them a little bit. I says, okay, well, you do this for remote viewing. I went out to Robert Monroe's Institute to do some additional studies to figure out, you know, astral body projecting, that kind of stuff, to figure out if I was doing that. And I wasn't necessarily doing that, but I wasn't doing remote viewing. I was doing something in between that, because I've had these experiences where I've been in places I probably shouldn't have been, and I've been discovered, and it's like, oh, no, you can't do this type of thing, you know? So you're actually outside of your body doing something. And so I went into these like heaven realms a couple times, and one of the last times I went there, I was actually into the Akashic Hall of Records, and there's this lady there who's this kind of a librarian, and kind of meets you at the door and says, okay, well, you know, how can I help you? Yeah. And I said, well, I'd like to discover such and such out. And I came back out, I'm walking out on the porch with her, and there'd be people there staring at me. I said, well, what's going on? She says, well, they don't meet your type here very much. I mean, you're my type. What do you mean my type? Yeah. She says, well, you're not from here. Yeah. And that's happened in 3 or 4 different occasions where I've gone someplace and said, oh, you're not supposed to be here. You're not this type. You know? I met up a couple of shamans and says, "Oh, you're one of those," you know. It's like, so I'm just coming to the conclusion that there's some of us down here who incarnate as being human, and we live the human experience. We have a human connection, so we do the human stuff, but we're star walkers, I guess what you call it, you know. And you're here to have an experience, but you don't necessarily have to go back to what they call the heaven realms. Okay, and so that's why I'm kind of, that's the only thing I've in my mind, that's the only kind of the way I can rationalize some of the stuff that's gone on. You know, because when this praying mantis thing, it was like, oh my God, man, this shadow thing, I've never heard anything of that before. And then I read just the other day on your site about some people having, I've seen this thing, but it's a shadow. And so I think it's their way of just popping in as interdimensional, kind of walking in between the world, so to speak. And they're saying, hey, you know, we're here. This is where we prefer to be because we don't operate very well in your environment, because we do have a really heavy environment to operate in on a spiritual basis. So
You've been told to not talk about these experiences.
yeah.
I think. By whom?
Well, the best way I can describe it is kind of a Men in Blackish type of a thing. They're kind of an interdimensional thing. The military is actually involved with these guys somehow. When I went to talk to I had an Area 51 conference I went to talk to once, when it was being held in Rachel, Nevada, before somebody went in and bought out Rachel, Nevada. You know, we would have a conference down there, and so I was asked to go speak there. And it was like 10 o'clock at night. I met with the director of it, and he says, "Hey, would you like to speak at this conference?" And at first, I was kind of reluctant. I said, "Yeah, okay." There's him, my friend, and one other person that was there at this event, right? When they said, "Hey, would you like to speak?" Next morning, 9 o'clock, I'm at work, and somehow somebody knows that I've already agreed to speak at this conference. How did they know? I don't know, because this is, excuse me, my throat's kind of weird. I get to work. This is going to sound even bizarre, I know, but this is how my life kind of goes. Okay. I get to work. I'm working on the computers. I'm doing phone work, you know, consulting and that kind of stuff. And I'm on the computer at work, and all of a sudden the computer screen starts spritzing out, right? Starts scrolling really weird and doing some weird stuff. And the phones start going a little funny. And I'm like, oh, no big deal. So I switch computers, right? Figured out the computer is blacking out, I'll switch computers. So I switch computers, turn the other computer on, and I'm starting to get all these crank phone calls. You know, it's like very sexually explicit stuff. I'm thinking, what do I do? Dial a sex line or something, you know? Because this is really weird, right? And the computer just starts crackling and crunching again and going all weird, and the screen starts scrolling, and I'm thinking, man, not again. So I switch computers again. And this time, I'm getting very, very sexually explicit calls from guys, from gals, from all sorts of people. And that's all I'm getting. You know, it's just these really sexually explicit stuff. And I'm getting really angry. My computer is just not working. The keyboard's malfunctioning. I'm thinking, what the hell? You know? So I actually take my headphones off. I throw them across the room because I'm really mad at this point. I'm thinking, okay, I've got to just calm down and do my shaman thing and clear out the energies and see what's going on, right? So I did that, and this portal opens up behind me. And when this portal opens up behind me, this is even more bizarre. There's this, like this 7-foot lizard guy appears in this portal behind me. And I turn around and I look at him, and his thing was, "Don't speak." That's what he says. You know, he's this really big, tall, and he's got a tail on him, and he's kind of holding himself up a little bit with the tail. And he's a very intimidating looking guy. He's got these yellow eyes with the black slits in them that go up and down. right? Instead of like our, they've got these weird pupils in them. And he looks at me and he says, "Don't speak." I'm like, "What are you talking about? How the hell did you even know I've got anything lined up to speak at this Area 51 conference, right?" I said, "Nobody knows about this. There's just 3 of us, right? That, and if you include myself, there's 4 people who know about this. And nobody else knows about this. And yet you're coming up to me and you're telling me not to speak." I said, "No, get out of here. Go away," because I know he's trying to intimidate me and I'm not having it. And he says, "Don't speak." And he raises his voice up even more, like he's going to really intimidate me, and kind of puffs his shoulders up, like, "Don't speak." And I'm at this point, I said, "No, I'm already signed up. I'm going to speak. I'm going to go to the speaking conference, and I've already committed." And at this point, I'm looking behind him, and it's like he's transmitting himself through a holographic image or something, because I'm noticing behind him, there's very much a military type of establishment that he's talking from. And there's a cave down there, and the top of it was kind of unhewn. It was like, but the walls, it had smooth walls. It had some walkers off to the side. It had a tile floor on it. And as I'm sitting there talking, I noticed there's this military guy walking behind him, and he's got this white cloak on, and he's got this butch haircut, and he's like holding a clipboard or something as he's walking by, like he's not paying attention to where he should be. And I'm looking past him and I'm thinking to myself, this is a military establishment. What the hell? They got this he's trying to be able, he's doing the same thing a man in black would do, a typical man in black would do, right? But it's a reptilian. I'm thinking he's holographing me from some sort of military establishment somewhere. I wonder if he's at Area 51. At that moment, he recognizes that I'm looking behind him and seeing what's going on. Now he's really agitated. He goes, "Don't speak." I said, "Get out of here." And it shuts down and it just closes in on itself and he's gone. And the computer comes back to normal. Everything's working fine after that. I'm continuing on with my day and I'm fine, right? So a couple of weeks later, well, actually it's about a month later, I'm down there speaking at this conference. And the first day, everything goes fine. Everything's great. I have no problems with it. The second day, I wake up and I can't see. I mean, I'm putting my sunglasses on and my eyes are very, very light sensitive. And I walk outside and I'm blind almost. I can hardly even see, and it just really hurts to be able to look out over the desert. Even in the inside, it's hard to see. So I speak that second day, and then we go home, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what? Again, it was like, what? I don't know what happened down there, but something kind of strange happened, right? And so again, I go to this hypnotherapist, and I say, a different one. This is a different one. And I say to her, I say, "Look, something's happened. I want to do a regression this time. I want to figure out what's going on." Right. So she takes me in and we do a regression. And after the first night, what had happened was I am waking up out of my bed and I'm staying in a trailer. They had trailers down there that they would offer to the people, the speakers and stuff. So I'm staying in the trailer and I notice lights just flowing through the window. And so I'm kind of dozy a little bit. I get up because I take it, it's just I'm woke straight up out of bed, I'm asleep, right? And so I wake up out of bed and I go over to the blinds and I part the blinds just a little bit. And there's a bunch of military vehicles out there. And one of them is one of those Jeeps that's got the biggest spotlight in the back of it. It's like in the back of the Jeep, or Humvee or whatever it is, it's got this light shining up and it's lighting up the area. And there's men walking around outside the trailer and around this Jeep. And then I just get this really, really severe like drowsiness, and I sit down on the side of my bed and I just plop over. Well, the next thing I know, I'm sitting in this room. It's very much a military type of a room. Yeah. And I'm staring at what I would assume is a sergeant or something. You know, well, let me back up a little bit. They put me in this room. I'm sitting in this chair, and next to me, I can feel on each side, there's like a guard sitting next to me, right? And I'm just sitting in this chair, and I want to turn around and look, and they just, no, you're not looking at they take my hand and they make sure that I'm staring straight forward. They won't let me look from side to side to see who's behind me, right? So I'm looking straight in front of me, and it's just a small room. It's got a table in front of me with a wooden chair in the back, kind of like a school table, like a teacher would have back in the day for their desk, right? So it's got the desk right there with a wooden chair in the back of it, and I'm sitting in the chair, and it's got the green paint on the walls, and then it's got that old asbestos tile, the old military green and white speckled tile all over the floor. And off to the right-hand side of me, there is a doorway. And I'm sitting there I don't know why, I'm just sitting there. And then I hear these footsteps coming up the hallway, and in walks it may be the same guy that was carrying the clipboard. He's got the white smock on. He's got a blue tie. It's tucked in, so I've taken he's Air Force. He's got a shaved head. If I saw him today, I would know who well, he may change it a little bit if he's still alive, because of his age, but I would recognize him. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. And he sits down at the desk, and he's got a pencil in his hand. He just kind of tapping the eraser on the desk. He's not looking at me. He just kind of slouched back in an angle on his chair, and he's looking at his pencil as he's tapping the eraser on the desk. And he says, "We told you not to talk. So what did you talk for? Why did you come back here and talk? We told you not to." I didn't say anything. I didn't answer him. I just smiled at him, and he just kept tapping his pencil on his desk. And some other guy comes around the corner, and he pokes in and says, "Sir, what would you like us to do with him?" And he kind of leans up on the table like this with the pencil in his hand. He doesn't look at me. He just says, "Take him back." Yeah. And so I could feel being lifted up, guided to be, the guys behind me grabbed me by the arms, and they lifted me up and started leading me out the door. Once I get around the door, there was this little reptilian guy sitting in front of me, and he's got this little spray bottle. And I look at him, and he goes in my eyes really fast. He sprays something in my eyes really fast, which I would take it were knockout drops, because I went out like that. I mean, I could just feel myself collapse, and they caught me. And whatever happened after that, I don't know. I'd have to go into some more regression to be able to get deeper into what happened. And then I remember waking up in my trailer, thinking, "Now my contacts are really bad. These contacts are not working." So I take them out, put some new ones in. It's like, no, this is not. And then I walk outside, and I can't see. In fact, I couldn't drive home. Somebody had to drive me home, on that one, because my eyes were just really bad. So, so they had abducted me at Area 51, and what else they did to me after that, I don't know. They may have, chipped me or something. I have no idea what they did, but that's that Area 51 thing.
Could you describe the portal that you saw with the reptilian coming out of it?
Oh, it was just like something opened up. Okay, it was not really any kind of it was just like a holographic type of thing that kind of boom, it pops up behind me. Okay, and so I don't know if it was a portal. I don't know if it was just a holograph being televised to me somehow, but that's kind of what it resembled, was a holograph. But it actually at the same time, it looked kind of like a portal too, of just a round kind of a doorway that just kind of just went whoop, and it's there, and he's standing there. Yeah. And so whether it's a holographic or if it's a portal or a combination of both, is I'm to this day I'm not sure what it was or how it got there, but I do know that somehow he was transmitting it from some area of probably Area 51. You know, I'm not sure where it'd be. Area 51's big and it's got all this stuff going on. So
What was the purpose of creating your book? Did you bring that out as a healing modality, or did you want to just get your story out?
no, that whole thing it started out as just being, okay, look, you guys are telling me not to talk. I'm putting everything down on paper and I'm talking about everything. Okay. You can't tell me what to do. This is just my rebellious nature. So I just sat down and I just wrote it out and put it on paper and self-published it. It says, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Okay, I'm putting it out simply because you guys tell me I can't, so I'm going to. So anytime I get the opportunity to talk about it, I'll talk about it. And no people are going to look at me and they'll say, you know, look at his body motion, man. I guess he's telling the truth, yada, yada, yada. You know, so I don't really care whether you think I'm telling the truth or not. This is what happened. My story is not going to change because this is how it happened. This is what happened. And there's a lot more that has happened that I'm not talking about for various reasons. So, you know, take it with what you want to do with it. I don't care. You're not hurting my feelings if you believe me or if you don't believe me. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Don. You've had an amazing experience. I'm jealous. It's been a pleasure to hearing your story today.
Dude, people will say that I'm jealous that you've had these experiences, maybe with the praying mantis, yeah, but it's got its negatives that go with it too, because there's a PTSD that's definitely associated with it. Because if you have an experience like the praying mantis, you come back from that and there's a serious adjustment that you have to go through, because it's not just you come back, it's just that you do have your psychological scars because you're coming from this environment that is just such a loving, such a pure, and I do mean this, it was such a really cool environment. So now you have to deal with life. It took me a long, long time and a lot of searching over the years. Literally, it was like a 20-year search to figure out why I was going through this and what was happening. I wanted to know the reasons and I wanted to go down the rabbit hole. And I went down the rabbit hole and I realized there's no bottom, there's no end. You just gotta kind of accept it and go with it, because it does have its disadvantages too. You know, you talk to anybody who's had a near-death experience and it's the same thing. They come back and they've got some serious life adjustments they have to go through. I think it's the same thing whether it's a positive or negative experience with ET contact, you have some serious life adjustments that you have to address, because now your whole reality has changed.
Thanks again for coming on.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
For those watching, hope you enjoyed today's story. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time. So, yeah, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.